Hello, humanity. Welcome back to the We Are Not Lonely podcast. Valentine's Day is fast approaching, and I wanted to do something in that spirit. So, today I'm going to be talking about a bunch of things. I will be covering things like the dating market, the modern dating market, dating apps, and of course, I'm going to be touching on the most important thing, my love life, or current lack thereof. So, the idea to do this particular podcast started a few days back, a couple of weeks back. I recently had the good fortune to fall very hard in love with a young lady who is going to remain unnamed for a very long time. Now, for certain reasons, I understand that this is probably never going to work out. And I'm not going to go into why I feel this way, why I think this way. But suffice it to say that I'm watching the entire thing with a very detached perspective. Now, I just want to make like a small thing. I'm very passionate. I fall deep and I fall hard into love, as a matter of fact. And this has been the state ever since I was younger. In fact, early on, there was a girl who actually rejected me, saying that I was too passionate to have a relationship with. I was just like, hey, excuse me, passion is the one thing that people want. And you're saying I'm too passionate? I'm not gonna go into what her love life is like now, but she's now a friend. I mean, we don't really talk anymore. I suppose that's what my situation. Okay, I'm not gonna get into that. I'm gonna start by telling you the story of this young lady that I fell in love with, and whomst I'm never gonna pursue actively because I don't really think I should. And it hurts me when I say this, man. I fell really deep. It's someone I know. And I've actually written this really beautiful masterpiece. I sat for like 2 to 3 days just sitting and wallowing in those emotions. And I wrote this really, I like to call it it's an honest outpouring of my emotions, man. So what I did was I fell in love really deep, really hard. And I realized that for many reasons, this might not be something I should pursue. And I decided to distance myself emotionally, and of course that whole process put me through a great deal of pain. Now, initially, whenever I go through something like this, I use the entire pain, the outpouring of emotions to create something, generally songs. But it's been a while since I touched the guitar. This habit sort of fell off when I was in Hyderabad, and I'm trying to get back on the wagon. I'm playing the guitar a lot more these days. And I might write a song, what the hell. But the point is, at this particular moment, I've written this sort of a letter expressing my love, like they would have done in the old days. But since I decided I'm not going to be pursuing it, made it I've titled it The Love Letter That Cannot Be Sent. The love/lust letter that cannot be sent. Now, the funny part is she's actually read this, but she doesn't know it was for her. And part of the entire thing is that I've written in the letter itself that she would read these words and never realize that they were for her. She would hear of the passion, she would read of the passion in the words, and she would hope that someone would love her the same way that I love this fictitious woman, not knowing that those words were directed for her all along. It's like this beautiful story. It's like a very tragic Greek story. Lost, one-sided love, pining and all of that. I know how much of a simp I sound like right now. And that's actually what I wanted to talk about as well. This is weird phenomenon in modern media. Pretty much every romantic movie that I've watched, pretty much every romance movie that I've watched has the guy acting like a fool, head over heels. Now I understand that love makes a person do weird things, it makes you do crazy things, as a matter of fact. But in the Hollywood movies that I've watched, every single one of them has the guy throwing away everything that he has for this woman. Now, the reality is quite different from the movie, obviously. If a man tried that in real life, he threw away all of his wealth, all of his everything. Modern women would leave that man before he had time to say, I love you. Now, I do sound like a cynic at this particular point, but that's only because I've done my reading, I've understood the trends. This modern dating market is not really beneficial to young men. It's tipped heavily in the sides of women, especially young women, and I'm going to explore that a little later in the podcast. But for now, basically, what happened was I fell in love. I wrote this, I like to call it a beautiful letter. The people who have read it have also said that it's a beautiful letter. The girl, you know, didn't really understand that it was for her. And she was like, who is this for? She's still not done asking me. I'm not going to tell her. For reasons that will remain undisclosed. But yeah, so I like to call this a beautiful love letter, and I've gone on and on about this for a really long time. I'll wrap this particular topic up. Essentially, I said everything I wanted to say, and she said it was beautiful. It was a very adult way of expressing love, because I'm an adult now, and the things that I've written were quite graphic. Well, not quite graphic, they were quite nice. If you're really interested, hit me up on Insta. I will, you know, if you seem nice, I will send you a copy of the letter and you can read it. Maybe I'll make it a blog post. I don't know. We'll see. Alright. So, I wanted to talk about like my entire transformation. I actually watched the entire transformation of myself with a very critical mind from the outside, like almost like I was detached watching myself go through this entire process. This time I was a lot more self-aware. Perhaps it's because I've started yoga. That's a possibility. I practice Ashtanga yoga, primarily asana pranayama, a little bit of meditation as well. The whole thing is, yeah, it's a whole different topic that I'll get into some other time. But generally speaking, when people say let's practice yoga, it's not necessarily the right terminology. Technically, what they're referring to is the practice of asana, maybe sometimes pranayama, and sometimes meditation. That's what yoga is reduced to. It's a lot more beautiful than that, and I just wanted to touch upon that particular subject since I brought it up. Anyway, getting back to the thing that I was talking about. I found myself turning into a love-struck fool. Now, the way I express my affection is doing acts of service. I like to spend time. I'm very physically affectionate, but the whole spending time thing, and this just makes me sound like a simp, to be honest. I was just becoming a simp with every passing moment. All I could think of was her. Every single moment I closed my eyes and there she was in front of me. That was my situation, right? But then I realized that I was being a square. This is not the way I was. I'm not this person. Now, chemically, looking at this entire situation from a chemical perspective, I've understood that it's an addictive process, man. Like certain people have compared this thing. It's as dangerous as an addiction to substances. And it actually impairs your judgment. And I've noticed that all of this was happening. And And this is why one of my favorite comedians, and I'd like to call him a philosopher because that's what he is, Patrice O'Neill, the late great Patrice O'Neill, talks about how it's impossible for a man to both like and love a woman at the same time. And he goes into depth about why this is, and I highly suggest you watch the video where he talks about this. But the ideal situation is when the guy likes the woman and the woman loves the guy. Any other situation is going to tip the balance and it's going to end up with a relationship ending. It's really weird. And I've done a lot of studies to understand why this particular phenomenon was happening. And I've sort of understood that it all boils down to the differences between the genders. Now, this is a very controversial topic that I'm entering. It's impossible to say these days that there are only two genders. It's become politically incorrect and so on and so forth. But I'm looking at biological realities, okay? From a biological perspective, there is the male and there is the female, the man and the woman. Let's not get confused with sex and gender. Those are just political tools being used to confuse us. That's a very... so many controversial statements. Anyway, there are physical differences between men and women. From an external perspective itself, there are clear differences. And I've learned this primarily from art. One of the ways you can make men look like men is the hip to waist ratio. Generally speaking, men have wider shoulders than hips, and it's vice versa for women. Women have broader hips than they do shoulders. And if you wanted to play around with the character, if you wanted to make a woman character look more masculine, you would play around with the proportions, and that's how you would do it. If you wanted to have a man look more androgynous, you would flip the script. You would make the waist larger, the hips larger than the shoulders, and that's generally how you play around with the way people perceive the character as a man or a woman. So, externally itself, there are physical differences. People have done the research and they've concluded that on an average, the man has higher upper body strength than the woman, so on and so forth. There are clear biological differences, and one of them is the physical difference, and it's visible as well. We have different body parts. Now, on an internal perspective, there's a huge amount of change as well. Men are primarily dominated by the presence of testosterone. The amount of testosterone is in men is vastly higher. It's higher than women. Now, women have two chemicals, and I forget the other one, but one of them is estrogen. The proportion, the amount of which, the proportion is never the same. It varies on a regular basis. They're very connected to the moon, and generally speaking, people say that women are more emotional for this particular reason because their chemicals are constantly in flux. Their hormones are constantly in flux. This is basic biology, but it's become it's become a revolutionary act to speak the truth in this modern day and age. And I suppose that's actually one of the reasons that people would say we're in the deep Kali Yuga. That's very true. Anyway, so when I got into this whole mode, I remembered this thing that Patrice O'Neill said, and I immediately started listening to his work to fix the damage because I realized, you know why they call why they call people lovesick? Falling in love is a kind of a sickness, man. Honestly, you get all these chemicals start flooding your body depending on the things that are happening, oxytocin, dopamine, and man, by God, it just unsettles you. It reduces critical thinking, and I needed to get back my faculty, my ability to think critically, and I started listening to Patrice O'Neill, and that brought back all of the knowledge that I had about the differences between men and women, and especially about love. Now the thing is, I'm going to just start off by saying something even more controversial. Men are the only beings that can love unconditionally. Now, there's an argument to be made about mothers being able to love their children unconditionally as well, and generally speaking, that is also true. Kali Yuga is messed up, man. There's a lot of unmentionable things that are happening. My point is that men are loved on the condition that they provide. Women, children, and dogs and cats are loved unconditionally. A man is loved on the condition that he provides something, provides some value. And this statement is kind of echoed in this particular, I guess it's a shloka. Udyogam Purusha Lakshanam. Industriousness is the mark, the hallmark of man. Udyogam Nasti, Lakshanam Nasti. A little joke. No work, no Lakshanam. People have commented on this particular topic a great deal. Not just comedians. People in the red pill community have also explored this topic in great deal. Now, I've mentioned the fact that I'm from India a great number of times, and it's kind of relevant to what I'm going to be saying next. In India, there's this phenomenon where people arrange marriages. The parents basically try to arrange a bride or a bridegroom for their child, and it's an accepted practice. There's a lot of horoscope matching and a bunch of other things to ensure that, at least on the surface, the couple would be happy. There's no blockage from the spiritual realm that would cause unhappiness, so to speak. Now, the thing that I've noticed, I've heard, whenever a guy attempts, this entire process is called matching. They call it looking for a bride slash groom. And this entire process for the guy, it's basically like, okay, what is his salary? What are the properties that he owns? What is their family? What is their family standard like? So it starts off with salary. Okay, and to be fair, it's a very practical question. All right, they need to be sure, the parents of the bride need to be sure that the groom can provide for their child. At the very least, they look for somebody who can maintain a certain standard of life for their child. They will ensure that, they don't suffer. Some happiness, some foreign trips. That's the standard now for a middle class family. They expect at least a couple of trips to another country. They travel a lot of vacations. And that's the situation, right? Even in an arranged marriage, this is where it starts. The thing about women, and this has been documented several times across, not just the Red Pill movement is aware of this, even Dr. Peterson has spoken about this particular topic. Women are hypergamous by nature. What does this mean? Well, specifically from a mating perspective, this means that women date across and up the competence hierarchy. Now, the competence hierarchy is a way, it was originally called dominance hierarchy, and eventually, I guess, people didn't want it to be called the dominance hierarchy anymore, because it seemed like everything was about power, but that's not really what it was. It's about how competent a person is, and the reason that people ask, when people meet each other, they ask, so what are you doing? It's a way of determining the social value the other person has so that they can be placed in the hierarchy. And there are certain ways that this hierarchy can be broken. People can create their own hierarchies. But generally speaking, in society, there are hierarchies, and no matter how much we try to argue against the fact that they are, argue against this particular fact, it's a fact. All right, people will always look to be superior in one way or another than another person. That's why people work hard. They want to be in a better position than somebody who does not work as hard. And this is a reality that most people on the left don't seem to quite grasp. Even the concept of equality is kind of flawed. Now, I'm always open. Now, this is a. I'm starting to digress, but let's just. Since this Pandora's box has been open, let's just go into it. This whole thing of equality of outcome is a fool's farce, alright? As long as you keep fixing the outcome, tremendously bad things are going to happen. People are just going to stop trying. The people, the as you keep fixing the outcome, the total outcome that is produced is going to keep falling because the number of parasites in the society are going to increase and the number of providers are going to decrease. Now, there's a certain ratio of providers to parasites. Beyond that, the host is going to collapse. In every system, there will be parasites. There will also be other things. We can have symbiotes. Sorry, not. You can have parasites, symbiotes, and providers. Generally speaking, you need the number of providers to be high, so that they don't get overwhelmed by the number of parasites. And what is going to happen when you keep fixing the outcome is that the number of parasites are going to keep increasing. The outcome is going to drop tremendously. As people see that their work is not valued, they will stop trying as hard, generally speaking. And this is just going to cause like another cataclysm. This is what happened in the Soviet Union. People pretended to work and they pretended to pay them. But for some reason, every person on the left thinks that true communism hasn't been explored, and we just need to try it once more with them as a benevolent dictator, and that time they would usher in the utopia. Alright, rant over. My point is that women date across and up hierarchies, competence hierarchies. They look for a person who is either equal, and even the idea of equal means that a person is earning 55% more than them. This was a thing that came across in one of Rollo's podcasts. Go check it out. He's done a lot of research. He's also a psychologist, and he's the grandfather, the great grandfather, the godfather of the rational male, the red pill community, you could say. So, Patrice O'Neill, the late great Patrice O'Neill, was one of the OGs, the GOATs, the person who spoke about red pill before red pill was popular, even before Rollo burst onto the scene. And he kind of understood the whole situation between men and women. Now, the thing about men is that the reason why men who can date more women are kind of looked up to, even by women and by men, is that it takes a lot of skill and ability, a certain amount of game, looks, and wealth. You need to be of a certain standard to be able to sleep with so many women, to sleep with and have relationships, or sleep with essentially, because no high value man is going to be bound, right? And people don't understand the fact that it is easy for a woman to find a man, whereas it's not the same for a man. All right? And this actually brings up the whole topic of the sexual market value into question. Now, for a man, his SMV, his value starts at zero. He has to work for everything in life. Generally speaking, those with wealth start out as a little more than a zero. They don't start at zero. People with wealth are automatically given 1/3 of the things that they need to get women. But even then, you just end up, if you don't have the right game, you just end up attracting a gold digger, right? This is a very out and out podcast, man. I didn't quite think it would go this way, but let's keep going and let's see. This is basically a red pill perspective on dating at this point. So what's happened in the modern world is that the ability of women to capitalize on their hypergamy has vastly been increased because of the internet. All right. Now, generally speaking, the idea is that a woman, her value peaks by the time she's 24, and then it's a decline. She hits the wall by 28, and this is generally the phase that women, especially in the West, start to realize that they can't live in their whole phase forever, and they start looking for a good guy. They start texting the good guys that were always around, were always in love with them, but they never had time for. And this is generally characterized by oh, I used to be a hoe, but I am a good girl now. I found God and I want to be better for myself and all of that nonsense. Essentially, this is them hitting the genetic wall. Now, it's kind of known that for women, there's a physical inability to have children past a certain age. Once you hit menopause, it's physically impossible for a woman to have children. And as the years pass by and the woman gets closer and closer to menopause, but not quite at menopause yet, the risks of pregnancy increase tremendously. This is a known medical fact. And one of the greatest tricks that our society has done, especially in the West, is they've convinced women that the greatest thing that they could have in their life is their career, that a family is not all that important. It might not be all that important for a very small percentage of women, but generally speaking, a great deal of the women, a great number of the women who have gone past that particular age and just focus purely on their career start having regrets about it later in their life, especially when they hit their mid 40s and so on and so forth. This is a well documented phenomenon. My point is that even this whole process, now I don't have any solutions. I'm just stating the problems. I don't know how we can fix this. I'm not saying that we should stop educating women, because the more you educate a woman, the more options she has, and that narrows down the available dating pool for her. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just stating these realities. I'm saying that as a woman gets more and more educated, her prospective pool of partners diminishes tremendously. That's a fact. What you want to do about it is up to you. Now, that's the thing for women, right? They start with a certain fixed value, and let's just be honest, it's primarily the. It's a lot. It's based on their looks. Because men are very shallow. That initial thing, men look for that. Men like attractive women. And one of the reasons that women doll themselves up is because they're looking to attract a particular mate. This is genetic. This has been in our DNA, in our biology for thousands and thousands of years. Some people would say hundreds of thousands of years. This is the situation. All right. And if you look at the mating, when we look at the animal kingdom, and it's easy to observe the animals and how simple their mating procedures are. There's a mating call. Some birds build a very beautiful nest. Some birds dance. Some birds draw. They build a beautiful nest. Some birds sing very loudly. And some fish build beautiful things. A penguin looks for a beautiful rock, and it presents that rock to a female penguin. There's there are certain procedures in the whole mating process for animals, and it's gotten extremely complicated for the human mating process. See, the problem is that men start off with a value that is essentially zero. They need to build themselves up. This particular sentiment is well known, especially among the Red Pill community. Dr. Peterson has also sort of alluded to this. He urges young men to take up more responsibility, and he says that starting a family is one of the ultimate responsibilities that a man can do. And he urges men to take up more and more responsibility that they can bear. And essentially, what happens is, as a person takes up more responsibility, he's able to create more value for those that he has taken up responsibility for. The amount of value that a person creates is sort of directly linked to their place in the competence hierarchy. And a higher value man is a person who is higher ranking in the competence hierarchy. It's not necessarily only wealth. That's something that I'd like to break apart right away. It's not just wealth. There's there's a theory that it's actually three pronged. The idea is that a man needs three things: wealth, game, and looks. And it's possible to increase the it's possible to increase the level of all three if you work hard enough. That's the general idea for men. And that's why young men are urged to take up responsibility at in every possible way. A lot of media, Jordan Peterson encourages young men to take up responsibility because it's going to help them improve their life. Start by taking responsibility for yourself, improve yourself, start with your room, start small, and things will gradually pick up. Now, the other thing is, I spoke about how the dating market for modern young men and women has completely changed because of the internet. Now, earlier, before 2005, the dating pool was severely limited because of the lack of. Well, you could travel around the world, but it wasn't that easy to be in touch with another person across the entire world with just a phone. And that's possible today. Young women on Instagram are exposed to all of these very constantly, they're constantly exposed to these high quality men. And the thing about men is, again, to be honest, any woman will have 1,000 DMs, dude. That's the nature of the internet. Men, that's how men are. That's the thing. Women will always have their pick of men. The differences in value are very controversial. It gets into the body count since it's difficult for a man to have access to many partners. He's kind of looked up to if he's had many partners. All right. Whereas if a woman does the same, since it's comparatively easy for a woman to get what she wants from a man. And let's just be straight up, dude. It's very easy for a woman to get a man, generally speaking. If she's very attractive, she almost has the pick of men. And that's why Bill Burr very emphatically states that women don't date projects, they wait at the finish line and they pick from the winners. And that's the truth. This is the dating approach, and that's primarily why all of the red pill content, all of the modern dating YouTube channels, everyone advises young men to improve themselves. They suggest going to the gym, working on a business, improve yourself, learn how to be more confident, learn how to be more charismatic, learn how to speak. There are all of these things because, dude, the modern dating market has revealed, especially with Tinder and all of that, just the way people swipe. Men are very liberal with the way they swipe, whereas women are very conservative. So, generally speaking, an average woman would have more matches than the average man. It's completely different because the average woman, generally speaking, is not going to end up with a high value man. God, man, this is completely derailed the entire point of what I was talking about. I started out with how I fell into love, and now I'm going on a rant about the dating market. But the truth of the matter is, the dating market is severely ruined, man. With the presence of apps like Tinder and Hinge and so on and so forth, essentially what happens is that a very small percentage of men date very. No, let me just like speak about that, right? What they've what is essentially happened is that women will not rate an average man as average. Average in looks, average in build, average in physicality, average in wealth. That's not how they look at it. What they say is they look at an average man and they consider him below average. They look at the top 20% of men in looks, game, so on and so forth, and they will assume that is the average. That's the issue. And that's why women on dating apps, that's why dating apps are generally a scam for men unless they're super fucking attractive. And that's where this whole black pill thing came into. And that's why dating apps are a scam unless you're super attractive. And that's what's led to the whole doomer slash black pill community just picking up, man, especially in the West. Because if you don't have good looks, and that's all you can communicate in the app, that's all you're communicating on the app. In person, women actually are quite different. They evaluate a bunch of other factors. But while you're on an app, the only thing that she sees is your attractiveness. And that's all that's going to determine whether she swipes right or left. And if you're average, you know that she's swiping left. Men know this. Men have seen this. You look at the average inbox of a woman on Instagram and a man on Instagram. A random woman, all she has to do is be attractive. And she gets everything. She just has to post pictures of herself, taken rather well. Depending on the kind of thing that she's going for, she can accrue a great deal of followers. Basically, what I'm saying is, we might not want to admit it, but one of the main things that a woman's got going for her is her looks. And even average women will get attention. And that's what the entire market has come down to. Instagram, today, the entire economy is about attention. Since we've reached the information age, the more attention you can grab, the more time you can have, the more attention you have from somebody, and the longer you can stretch that attention to, it changes things. And that's why men are finding it extremely difficult to keep up, because women are built for this. They just have to post pictures. You can go on Insta and just look up the number of IG thoughts. If she's relatively attractive, goes to the gym, she's going to have a few thousand followers. Just for that. Look at men, on the other hand. I know one of the people close to my family has shown me the Instagram requests, and they had more than like 100 and 150. She's got 0 posts. She's just got a picture. She doesn't even show her entire face, but it's obvious that the account belongs to a girl. And she's gotten message requests from over 200 people. She has 0 posts. This is what the average man is against. How do you stand out from the crowd? This is the question. And it's no wonder that men are deciding that they don't want to compete. It's becoming increasingly difficult for men to do all of this. And the expectations that women have are just outrageous. They expect millionaires. And they're average. They do nothing to add any value to that man's life. And they expect a millionaire to take care of them. That's their bare minimum. That's their bare minimum. And this is the dating market. This is the state of the dating market today. Over the top expectations from women that men just can't. That men just can't reach, that they just can't fulfill. And more men are just deciding to tap out of the dating life, out of universities, out of work, out of life. They would rather stay home, work some dead-end job, get the bare minimum, smoke weed, and jerk themselves off to pornography. That's the situation of the human race. And though it looks like we have like too many people on the face of it, we don't. There's, I don't think I've ever heard a more genocidal statement than the fact that, oh, we have too many people on the earth. No, we don't. It's just that the Western model of consumption is unsustainable. Okay? The most populous countries don't eat as much, don't consume as destructively as the West. But that's not the point. What I was talking about was how the modern dating market is extremely rigged. It's extremely worrying. People are tapping out of the dating market at dating, having families, choosing not to have careers. And if this continues, we're going to have a generation of lonely women. And I say this specifically lonely women because there's going to be nobody. There's going to be nobody who wants to do this. Men are tapping out, men are going their own way. And the few men, this is increasingly, basically high value men who put in the effort. Now the world is a picking for them. The world is their picking. It's all for them. Everything. So what was the point of this entire podcast? I started out speaking about how I fell in love. The point is, even though I'm in love, I'm not pursuing it. I'm choosing to focus on my goals, my career, on building something of value. Love will come if it is meant to be. I will pursue whatever I want. I will pursue my goals. And if someone, I will also put myself into the dating market, meet more people, meet more women. And if it happens, it happens. But honestly, I've got more important things. But I understand that this is an important topic to a lot of people. For a lot of people, this is one of the prime things that occupy their mind, the average person. Understandably, because the urge to procreate and create a family, it's genetic, dude. You're literally, it's hundreds of thousands. Ever since life began, the, the entire point was to create the next generation so that our genes survive. That's the urge, that's the biological urge driving all of us. And it's really important because that's what sustains a civilization, that's what sustains living beings. The issue is we've reached a point where society, I hate saying that, but society itself has reached a point where we're like, no, thank you. I would rather not. No, thank you. And I don't have anything positive to end this on. Population is actually falling. And with the rise of all of these other things that I just spoke about, I honestly am concerned for the human race. That's it for today's podcast. We started with love, we ended with a very, how do I say this? Negative view of how the world is going to be. That's how it goes. That's how the cookie crumbles. So thank you for joining me today. I understand that I ended up in a very negative podcast, but this is a reality, man. This is the reality of the world, and we need to face reality. We need to wake up to reality. Nothing ever goes as planned in this accursed world, as Madhuru would say. Anyway, if I have a message to young men, it would be improve yourself, man. That's all you have as your defense against the world. Thank you. I will see you in the next podcast next week. Bye bye.